you're going to keep me on or just cut me.
Cut me, Mick, cut me. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Writer's Room. I am your host, Kat Rocha, the night editor, and with me, as always, is
J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit, and host of his own new show, The Great Big Alien Show.
Oh, wow. We have to talk about that.
We can definitely do that. Okay, who's next?
I am the Beast Lord, otherwise known as the Buddy Lord. I have a book coming out this month called Sins of the Fae. I'll be talking about that all the time. But hey, nice to see you guys.
And I'm John Stephen Walsh, and I have just drunk almost 2 liters of Coke in the last couple of hours. So
He means cocaine, not pop.
who the hell knows what's going to come out of my mouth in the next hour? So you've been warned.
Well,
But I have
just let us know if you have to go to the bathroom. We'll wait.
So we decided to go live a little early because the behind-the-scenes conversation was getting interesting, and John was mentioning something Kat had said a couple weeks ago about romance plots.
Kat, you do know what I'm talking about, right?
I said a lot of things about romance plots, and I came off of work about 10 minutes ago, so my brain is mush.
Oh, well, let me refresh your memory.
Okay.
We were specifically talking not about romance novels, but the sort of fantasy and science fiction novels today that are wish fulfillment romances.
Like
character
Twilight?
Thank you. That's good shorthand for that, isn't it?
It is good shorthand.
And I happen to be going through a ton of book storage. I'm talking thousands of books, and I was looking through the older books from, I'm talking the 70s, the 60s. They weren't like that. They weren't these. The main character is this shy girl who is standing in for all the shy girl readers, or the boy who is. Heinlein in his juveniles sometimes touched on that a little, but he got out of it very quickly. He basically said, listen, kid, you're going to be dead by page 10 unless you smarten up. You know, he wasn't kissing up to these boys. He was telling them, you can't be a boy. You have to grow up. And I looked through some of these books. I looked through like the Ursula Le Guin and such, and it's like, no, science fiction wasn't like this all the time. It wasn't.
Earthsea trilogy is amazing, or the Earthsea books are amazing.
Everything she did was amazing. She wrote one of my all-time favorite short stories. We're talking top 3. It's called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. Have you ever read it?
No.
It is. I stumbled on this short story, when I think I was in the 8th grade. Oh, a nice little short story, a cool little fantasy story. The story has no dialogue, and it has no characters. It has one. I'm not sure. It has actually one character. Most of the story is a description of this idyllic village, a fantasy village. If you read it today, you'll say, "Wow, this is like every fantasy fan's dream." You know, everyone's equal, everyone's wonderful, and I'm not going to ruin the story for you. And then she says, "Do you believe this?" Next paragraph. Well, I have one more thing to show you. And what she shows you, when you're a kid and you read this, you walk around vibrating for a few days, because she basically lures you into this fantasy world, and then she slaps you in the face as hard as she can.
Oh, wow.
And that to me is what I want to get out of a fantasy story. I don't want a romance.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think right now it's just everyone's approaching it from such a different angle. The idea of what storytelling is, or is it even about storytelling?
Mm-hmm.
But so we had a very specific topic tonight, directly related to a listener's question.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they realize it or not, the question was, well, what happens when you have too many ideas for your story? Otherwise, what is known as the kitchen sink plot, which is you're trying to cram way too much into the story, but at the end of the day, you don't have a story.
Oh wow.
I still kind of think Twilight could be that too.
And, occasionally there are kitchen sink plots that do work. I think they tend to be more humor based.
Well, I don't want to just talk over Buddy all night, but I do have something very specific that applies to this subject.
Go for it.
Last year on April 1st, on my Facebook page, I said, everybody give me an idea, and I will put all of these ideas into one story, which is basically asking for what you just described. I got about 18 ideas, lined them all up, wrote them down, and I literally wrote 5 different attempts, which amounted to about 30,000 words. And none of them turned into a story. 5 totally different stories. And it as an exercise, it was exactly what you're just describing, because it was like, for example, so one was like a witch on a broomstick. Another one was Burl Ives, the singer, the guy who was the snowman in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
There was a can of Schlitz. All these things, and I wrote 30,000 damn words, all these different stories, because you think that stuff is inspirational. Well, stories aren't about inspiration. Starting a story is about inspiration. So it's like starting 18 different times. And it just, it was, okay, well, I'm here now. I have to shove this thing into it. And I have to shove this thing into it now, 2 pages later. And now it sounds like a really stupid thing to do, obviously, because it was a stupid thing to do. But I thought it's an interesting illustration, isn't it? That when you have this big stack and you're just trying to shove it in, and it's like, okay, well, where's the story?
Well, as far as an exercise goes, I actually think it's a great idea. It's just, how much can you shove into your story until it explodes?
Right.
To the point where it just becomes so top heavy, or it just becomes too much that it collapses under its own weight. And it's a great way to exercise your creativity as well as your writing skills. So, just as an exercise on its own, I think it's great.
Well, one of the things about a kitchen sink plot is often it's the sign of a new writer or somebody who isn't really well versed in what they're doing, meaning they haven't read a lot. They haven't really started to get down and break down how a story works and why a story works. So you get a lot of these young writers who will think, okay, well, the more shit I cram in it, the even better it's going to be. Or conversely, you get these people that it's never been done before. And, usually there's a reason it's never been done before, because it's a bad idea.
See my Night Editor episode on that.
Or conversely, another kitchen sink plot, and we're seeing a lot of these days, is when you have got a kitchen sink full of political agendas and ideologies and minorities and identities that you need to shove into your story to please everyone. And you've got nothing. So
I think there's
1,000 tons of shit in a 1 pound sack.
Yeah. I think there's a few of these. I think one way you get this is if you write to an agenda, because when you write to an agenda, you have to make things happen. And when you're trying to make things happen, you keep shoving more like Deus Ex Machina and MacGuffins and everything else in the plot, because it's not designed. It's like a door. Like, I don't know if you guys remember that old story about the car manufacturers, when the inspectors, when they inspected the car manufacturers in Japan and America, when they came to America, they were inspecting them, and they'd go to the end of the line and they'd always hit the door, and they're like, why are you hitting the door? Because it's got to close. And it was designed incorrectly. When they went to Japan, they had no hammer. And he's like, why don't you have a hammer? How do you close the door? He said, well, we designed it to. And it's the same thing that happens in a story. If you don't design a story to go a specific way, you end up throwing a lot of crap into it that doesn't need to be there. So you're writing to this agenda. It's like, you're writing to an agenda, I think that's a lot of what happens in movies like The Last Jedi. stuff didn't work because it was a certain way before. Now you've got to make it a new way. To make it a new way, you've got to invent all this other crap. So then what happens? You have all this crap. Then people look at it and they go, why is any of that there?
And you get the Homer Simpson mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I believe happens is writing by committee.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's the worst way.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the committee's like, well, what about, it's like you made a soup, you made a great, I don't know, let's say you made a great vegetable soup, and all of a sudden, like, but what if you had some pepperoni? I like, pepperoni's good in this, it'd be good in that too. Sure. Add some oregano, add this, add that. All of a sudden, the soup is just, it's a mess. It's just crap. It's quagmire. It's like genetic malaise that nobody wants to touch. It's got a simulacron of a horrible face that's telling you, that you're haunted.
Well,
and
when you mention the Last Jedi and the writing a story by committee, it reminded me one of that story I just told you about, but also the way Ray Bradbury said to write a story, which was you come up with one thing that obsesses you. Like when he was a kid, he was obsessed with the attic. So he one day decided, I'm going to write a story about the attic. And he did. And it was a great story. Last Jedi didn't come from one artist's impulse. It came from a bunch of people sitting around saying, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And that to me is the example of my story with the 18 ideas.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it's writing to an agenda, because you've got one, you had like Kathleen Kennedy, the Force is female, everything has to be feminist, this person's got to be the bestest ever, whatever, right? But then you already have the established canon, so it's fighting that. So in order to get past that, they make crap up. And then you have a director that was just like, well, I like it when like half the people like my movie and half the people hate it. I think that's really cool. Well, I think it'd be cool to kick you in the nuts, but
Well, but can't you write something good with an agenda behind it, with a point?
I mean, yeah, I totally agree.
Like 1984.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can write something, quote unquote, to an agenda if it's intelligently written and you're not like stepping on the toes of somebody before you. 1984 was obviously an original concept. You know what I mean? It was Bradbury going, or excuse me, Orwell going, yeah, let me get into this. Let me write about the government taking over, becoming Big Brother, doing like a super communist kind of thing. Right. And it's like, okay, all right, that's a good idea, right? Let's do that.
But did 1984 preach at you and read like a manifesto, or was it a narrative that let you see through someone's eyes?
It was a narrative that you see, just like with Animal House,
Yeah, I love that movie. You mean Animal Farm?
My brain was freezing there. I was like,
sorry guys, I worked about 14 hours today. I apologize.
I'm with you there.
I like the part when John Belushi smashes a hippie's guitar.
Yes.
Oh, what a middle finger to the anti-establishment. He was the rebel's rebel. See?
And then Belushi got sent to the glue factory. Oh wait.
John Belushi was what was the thing that Ryan Johnson says about expectations?
Subverting?
Yes, John Belushi subverted your expectations. Because see, you thought that movie was going to be siding with the hippie, but it didn't.
No.
It sided with drunk asshole.
There you go. Drunkenness over the establishment and the anti-establishment.
So, was there more to that, buddy, or
which part? I went all over the place. I digress a lot.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm getting at is basically they're two separate. Like to me, when you're talking about the kitchen sink, there's the biggest like problems that I think a writer has, or the sort of beginnings of it, the impetus of it, is that they didn't design it to be a certain way, so they just throw a bunch of shit in there to make it fit to an agenda, or it's written by committee, and the same thing, they just throw a lot of stuff in there and they don't really know what's going on, because then the whole idea of the story is, let's face it, most stories, you got a hero, they want something more than anything, there's something that opposes them, go.
Ish, what made you think of this kitchen sink? That was there a specific thing that was bugging you about this subject?
We had a listener from I think a week or two ago ask, how do you deal with writing a story when you've got far too many ideas you want to cram into it? And I said, that's a kitchen sink plot. And we said we'd do a show on it.
Kat, as an editor, have you seen this? Have you read?
Oh yeah. In fact, I did, I think, 2 episodes of Night Editor on this subject. Yeah, basically, what I have seen, and I agree with Buddy on this, is that one of the big culprits that I found is kitchen sink plots tend to happen with writers, whether they are seasoned or if they're just new to the craft, who don't sit down and figure out, the story that they want to tell, getting from point A to point B. Even if it's just simply saying they begin here, they end there, done, it at least gives a framework for where they want to go. Because without that framework, without actually establishing some sort of parameters, it's too easy to go off the rails. And I think the other big culprit isn't so much the first novel, but the sequels, because the author now, either they are obligated through contract, they have a certain amount of time that they have to get this written, or they start getting
never planned it,
like stage, not stage fright, getting anxiety, like, oh, I got to
performance anxiety.
Yeah, and it very quickly can go off the rails
because it reeks of desperation. It's I use this first thing, and it's not making you feel. It's not making the story ignite. So I'm going to throw this second thing in, and by the time you get to the 14 things, you're like, well, okay, I have a unicorn, I have an alien spaceship, I have a building made out of chocolate fudge. Nothing is lighting. It's not lighting. That to me is the metaphor. It's you're trying to get the engine to turn over, and it's just not going. It's
often with sequels, there's a kind of a notion that the next film or the next story or the next comic should be bigger and better and greater and more expansive than the prior, and that's totally not true.
There's that expectation among audiences, or it's what people think the audience is like. For example, The Last Jedi was a much smaller scale story. It was just about one spaceship chasing after another one.
Oh, Jesus, don't remind me.
And for some reason it can't overtake it, so the arguments for it's like, oh, it's much more characters, and it's like, F you, it's not character.
I want to know who was the bright person who invented fuel in space when it's never been there before. We have fuel all of a sudden, guys. We got gas.
We just need one spaceship to drive through the Death Star and it'll blow it up. Why are we attacking it? Let's send one guy will take care of his family and say, hey, you're the man. You have to drive through that thing. Light speed at the end.
It's like the slowest chase ever, In most movies, like they try to condense the chase. They want to make something that, would normally last 10 minutes, last 35 seconds so that it's kinetic. It's sort of like when you're writing, you have that style, right? When you're writing action, it's very quick periods. You're using quick phrases and sentences to kind of impose the idea that it's immediate, right? And it is, as opposed to they took something that's supposed to be immediate and made it like a universe, and you're like, God, when does this end?
The most lugubrious space chase in history.
Well, I guess I'm going to flip that. I want to flip that around, but the complaint is it's 2 ships and it's slow moving, and it's about as interesting as watching snails fuck. To flip that around, compare that to probably the best starship battle ever seen on the screen, and that is Wrath of Khan, the Enterprise versus the Reliant. It's slow, it's plotting, it's tense. A lot of it's just them.
It's a sub-hunt.
Yeah, a lot of it is them kind of trying to outpace and outmaneuver each other in a nebula, and then the flashes of action are very brief, but it does it right.
I have you guys all beat on that because I was in the theater opening night for Wrath of Khan.
Dude, nice.
This was back in the time when you didn't have these camps of oh, you like Star Wars, oh, you like Star Trek. It was just, hey, how old was I?
I mean, was this back in the day of like drive-through Nickelodeons? I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, actually watch it on Edison's cylinder, you bastard.
You had to crank it.
Exactly. That's why I have the apparatus now.
Look, it
And-
was long enough ago that a movie might be at the theater for a year.
Yes, and I just want to speak to what you just said. Okay, I was I saw Star Trek when I was a kid. I was now, I think, years old, and so you're watching it and you can feel the whole audience is, oh, this is a very enjoyable movie. Okay, then you cut to the Reliant on a full face-on shot. And James Horner used his evil theme for the first time in his life. He was going to end up using it about 1 million times after that. But all right. Now, if you examine that whole battle, that first battle, it shoots into the side of the Enterprise. Then you see it on the screen flying by, shooting a torpedo. That's about all the miniature effects in that whole sequence. It's like 5 shots. And I can tell you this much. When they fired into the Enterprise, you could hear the whole audience going, holy bleep.
Yeah.
And it was one shot. and the reason was we had never seen that happen before. The Enterprise had never been blasted before. It meant something. And then, as you say, the climax is a sub-battle. It's because it's a battle between Kirk and Khan, who never actually appear in the same room together in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Because it all means something.
We care because the whole time we care about these characters. We've been following through this film. They've got this history.
Right.
And there's that whole notion of, can Kirk do this?
Yes.
His ship has been crippled. He's up against an enemy who is, still in his prime, where Kirk is kind of aging out. He's no longer the captain he was. And I mean, it's just, there is a reason that is a good battle.
Well, this is the crux of the bad storytelling and the kitchen sink, is that if we don't care about the characters and the situation first, we don't give a shit what you put in the kitchen sink.
Well, or you do care, and that's why it's ridiculous. Like, to go back to Star Wars, I keep thinking of that one robot chicken skit where you've got you know what I'm talking about, where you have the Luke hanging off the thing.
Speaking of kitchen sink, go there. Yes,
you got Luke hanging off of the aileron there in Empire. His arm's been cut off, and then you got Vader, and Vader says, "Luke, I'm your father." No, and Leia's your sister. No, and then it just starts going down the list of all of these things. This is when the prequels were happening. This isn't the current shit.
And you know that robot you hang around with, C-3PO? I built.
No. It was that, and I built 3PO, and then just Luke just gets up off the aileron and just walks.
Kenobi was my master.
No, said, if you're not going to take this seriously, why should I even bother?
And I played with Greedo as a kid.
Yeah, no, but it was that skit was so perfect and so beautifully illustrated. Again, the kitchen sink bit of just piling on more and more shit on top of a beloved story. And again, this was the prequels era. This isn't, the current crop. So every time I would find out more about the current plots, I just kept thinking of that skit.
So I want to move on to something else about kitchen sink plots. And the fact is, there are kitchen sink plots that work, but it all depends on the staging of the story. I will bring up one first because a listener put it up, and that is Inframan. And now I'm going to post the trailer to this film down in the chat, but Inframan plays like a 12-year-old's fantasy.
That's when I saw it.
It is 12. No rhyme or reason. The bad guys show up out of a mountain for no reason, invade China for no reason. Mm-hmm. The science task force turns some guy into a super cyborg. For some reason, the army can't fight these rubber dinosaur monsters, so he has to do it. And I mean, literally, just through the and then this happens. Oh, and then he gets this power because this happens,
Well,
and then this thing happens, and then the water blows up, and
well, and the sexy sister of Rita Repulsa. I mean, it is a Princess Dragon Mom. Yes, that really is what her name is. Is she from space? Is she from, is she a reptoid from under the planet? Is she a demon? We don't know. Where did she get her minions, especially the chick with eyeballs on her hands? We don't know. It's never explained. It never comes up. It's just all sorts of, well, it looked cool, so we're going to put it in.
But the framing it was just such a light action sort of story. You could get away with just this constant rapid fire balls out explosions and kung fu fights and just and now we're going to start crashing motorcycles into the bad guy
because it's like a straight-faced parody. It's the movie maker and the audience is saying, look, let's have some fun with this. We're not going to take it seriously, but we're not going to talk down about it either. There's a line you're walking there. Because it's not going completely like, oh, this is just stupid, you idiots will buy anything. It's no, this stuff can be fun. Let's just play for the fun instead of, I mean, the original script for The Empire Strikes Back had a scene where Ben had Luke swear that he would fight only for justice. Okay, that's awful.
There is. Like Exevius, he's my colorist. He's also a guy that's sometimes on this show and other shows. He has the original script before
Kaz did.
Oh my god!
God! We should bring him
before like his wife and everybody got a hold of it, and it is amazing how bad it was.
Wow.
Do you think we could bring him on where we could actually just talk to him about that script?
I guess he loves Star Wars. I mean, if you guys want to talk Star Wars in the original, he'd love that.
There's a book called The Secret History of Star Wars. Did I mention this before? It's not. It sounds like it's like an inside fan thing. It's what it is this writer. I believe he's a script teacher in Canada. He went through every draft of every Star Wars script for the first 6 movies. And he breaks this down to the point where if you're not totally into how this stuff happens, you will be crying for mercy. And particularly in The Empire Strikes Back, he writes, basically he sets up how the original draft, Vader was not Luke's father. And then George Lucas got that idea and he knew he was basically on the precipice of something, which is, if I go with this, I'm shrinking the story. Whereas if I go the other way and make it just Luke versus Vader and Vader's a bad guy who betrayed his father, it opens up the story. So it's not just about the Luke Skywalker family. Now, he would have been drummed out of the Screenwriters Guild if he didn't go the way he went. It's such a great idea. It's such a great idea to have the villain be the hero's father, and he didn't know it. But it just shows you how flexible all of that stuff was before it got to the screen. And the original script was just they escape the Empire, they go to a battle station, they escape at the end. It was just nothing. It was nothing. And then Lee Brackett did a draft.
Here's a question for all of you. Would you say that the tone of your story also dictates how much wiggle room you have as far as kitchen sink? Meaning, I've got this cool idea, it would work here. Whether it's a serious story, horror, drama, comedy, does the tone of your story dictate how much wiggle room you have?
I would say realism. I mean, if you're trying to go for a realistic tone, you probably don't want to just throw everything in you can. You can disagree.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking, I would say yes and no. I mean, I say yes and no. I mean, tone is a big deal. Tone is one of the last things I believe a writer learns. But you don't, you don't always need to keep tone if you understand what you're doing. I always say that it's a nap thing. And what I mean by it's a nap thing is like, if you mean to take a nap, then it's fine. If you really didn't want to take a nap and you just all of a sudden take a nap, it's kind of screwy, and you know, there may be something else wrong. And it's kind of the same way with a story and tone. If you mean to be funny, or if you mean to be a certain way, and you know what you're doing, okay, even if it's like a horror story and you're putting a little bit of a comedic element into it to lighten up the mood and kind of create a juxtaposition of emotion, that's fine. But if you don't know what you're doing, and it just sort of happens in there, then it feels weird, and people are like, what am I supposed to feel? You know, and if you throw too much of a, you know, if you want to keep a tone and you keep throwing kitchen sink elements in there, it's going to become a parody of itself, whether you want to or not.
Yeah. I did want to bring up one other great example of a kitchen sink plot and writer that it works, and it works well. And that is a lot of the early work of Douglas Adams. I would say the vast majority of the Hitchhiker's Guide series is all kitchen sink with a paper-thin plot. And he even admitted himself that tons of stuff he threw in there at random was just to fill space or because he thought it was funny. But it works because of the format and the setting and the kind of story he's telling.
Actually, you bringing that up, I think goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, you know, there's that tipping point. Because I was thinking of Adams as well, where after Life, the Universe, and Everything, it fell apart. Yeah.
But I think that touches on what Kat was saying about tone, which is you get to the point where it's just one damn thing after another, and you're it's almost like the story is there for the stuff as opposed to the stuff being there for the story. It's just one more thing. Let's throw this next crazy ass thing in there. Douglas Adams thing and the Inframan, you could both say are kind of are both variations of comedy.
Yeah.
You start throwing too much in, the reader is like, well, what the hell am I supposed to be focusing on here? I mean, that was an interesting bit. Now this is an interesting bit, but what the hell is, if the story has a tone, if it's heading somewhere, two of the stories I just worked on were variations on the same thing. One was about a man who's gradually being drawn to something that happened to him in the past that was horrible. And the climax of the story is he accepts it. Now, certain things happen. People start disappearing. He can't get a signal on his cell phone, and then people are saying, "I can see you. I'm 20 feet away from you. Why can't you see me?" It's because he shifted somewhere, and you're being drawn back, as he is, to that event. I did another one about a person who was going through their life, and these various things were happening, and you could say, my God, this is like the kitchen sink. It's like It's a Wonderful Life. We're seeing this happened to him, and then this happened to him, and then this happened to him, and it becomes this kind of nightmare. But at the same time, it's almost a comedy. It's like, oh my God, what the hell is going to happen next? Is this 8th grade teacher going to show up and lecture him? I think you're exactly right when you talk about tone, because I don't know how you can just keep adding stuff, because it's going to just start being, okay, what am I supposed to be paying attention to here? What are you trying to tell me with all this stuff?
No, I agree.
I think it's, I don't know, like you have, what is it, like Tom King?
Oh God, yeah.
You know, Tom King has he's like, I'm gonna, like, I think it's kind of a weird kitchen sink, because it's like, I'm gonna show you women rule, you know, and guys suck. And it's just every reason why that is in the context of a superhero book.
He's trying to overwhelm the reader, like, you will have no choice but to see it this way.
I'm going to show you the kitchen sink of my personal baggage.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's like, I don't know, one thing that I think happens in stories and movies, especially lately, when you're writing to an agenda, what ends up happening is that you write to a scene without earning the scene. That's one of the things that I see in, you know, you'll see in like anime and manga, the really good ones, they earn that scene. They earn that like 2 fucking minute clip that's on YouTube that every one of you, that, you know, like one of the latest ones for My Hero Academia, Endeavor, plus Ultra Prominence Burn. That's amazing scene. But it builds up to it. It builds up to it the second you see him, and he's a dick. And he's a dick to his family. And then he builds, and he becomes a character. And he becomes a better character. And he learns, like, I'm the hero now. That means I have to be the hero, not just for me, not just for my family, but for everybody. So what does he do? He becomes a hero he never thought he could be. And in that moment, he raises his hand high, and everybody says, fuck yeah. And how many times has that happened lately for, like, comic books or movies?
That's a great illustration of what we were talking about before about the agenda-driven thing. If you have an agenda, care about any of that, because you care about, I just want to see the tough woman beat the bad guy's ass in the climax. That's all I care about.
Exactly.
She's already earned it because she's a strong woman, as opposed to a character. Or a character is, I'm a reader. She might be interesting, but what's she about? What's she doing? Where is she going? Oh, is
Yeah,
she
it's like,
doing this?
why? I mean,
Following
somebody's
the
talking about
story.
yeah, exactly. Somebody's talking about The Last of Us, and I mean, we could throw it in there. Just saying that's probably going to be a kitchen sink kind of thing, because they're going to have to invent a bunch of crap to ruin the characters that came in the first game.
I don't know. Is there much? Go.
Just
Ish, you sound like you're frustrated. Are we not touching on the real?
No. Actually, I'm in full agreement.
I do. Sorry, Kat.
no problem. Go ahead.
They said not to talk about it, but go ahead, dude.
I think the tone thing is an enormous part of this. Because again, when you start adding too much stuff, it veers into parody. It becomes purple. It becomes this big glumping thing that is like, I am going to brain you with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I really do think that's a tone thing. I mean, read like Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon is the ultimate kitchen sink book. It has speaking characters in the freaking book. It's the part of the vision. But guess what? Not a lot of people can do that. Not a lot of people can write a 1,000 characters in a book and have a vision like that. It can barely get through a 2-hour movie called The Last Jedi. And
We know George R. R. Martin, he's got about 1,000 characters. He doesn't even remember half of them anymore. He admits that.
I bailed out in the first book at about page 60. I'm like, I can't.
Thank
keep
you.
these.
Thank you. That dude writes. I'm sorry. He, like everybody, I don't know. He's got a Tolkien-esque style, but he's like Tolkien, like covered in molasses, moving uphill in chains in the snow. In the snow. And he's like, dear God, please
I
make
got
your
through it
point.
because I had the TV show to go, oh, it's that person. Okay, that's what's going on.
He wrote a very good novella called Sand Kings. Did you ever read that or see the? They did a Twilight Zone, the color Twilight Zones in the 80s.
The only other thing besides GOT that I've read that he did was this like superhero collection thing.
Right, it's an ongoing thing. Like each
Wild cards.
one.
Yeah, and there was one with like literal penis magic. This dude blew up a building with his penis by getting a blowjob.
Fuck.
Wow.
Oh.
Well, I will say that Game of Thrones became infinitely more interesting when I found out that it's basically the prequel series to his science fiction stories.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I
got this book because a friend of mine who reads a lot of fantasy told me to get it. And I got about page 60 and I said, this is very well written. And I closed the book and put it down and had no impulse to ever pick it up again. I'm not trying to, I mean, he's a superior writer. He's a fantastic writer, but I don't give a damn about any of these people. And I don't know why I'm supposed to either. It's this one and the Kings, and I don't care about Kings. I just don't care about them. I don't give a damn about swords and dragons. I just don't. Life is too damn short. I've had 3 near-death experiences, and I'm staring into the abyss. I don't want to think, oh my God, all that time I spent reading George R. R. Martin novels. I could have helped out the homeless or spoken to my loved ones. Instead, I read this goddamn crap about dragons.
See, that's what books on tape are great for, because I just listen to it on my commute.
Sure. Well, you're an intelligent person. I'm just angry.
No, I'm a busy person. I haven't read an actual book in over a decade.
I don't have
sad.
I'd have no patience with audiobooks at all. And I have tons of them. And I've never gotten through a single audiobook. Not once. I just get like, oh God, come on. Because if I know if I'm reading it, I'm like, I can read faster and move. I have tons of these things. And people, when I go, people are going to say, why does he have all these damn audiobooks? I don't know. I'll just throw them away.
Well, to go back to your to the topic of tone, the reason why I brought it up is that I found, no matter what the book is, there's a tipping point. Where there's just too much shit in the sack. The goofy meter gets thrown off balance. It's just the plot just can't take any more shit shoved into it. But I found that certain stories have more wiggle room, like than others. Comedy, of course, depending on what type of comedy. You can throw more stuff in, like Douglas Adams, than you could, a piece that's incredibly, tight, like Fahrenheit 451. There's no room there.
Right. Can anyone think of a kitchen sink book that's a series or book story, whatever, it's not a parody, even, and by parody I don't necessarily mean ha ha ha, but it's that insane wackiness.
Yeah.
Can anyone think of one?
Saga.
Well, I can think of a few that I know are popular, but when I read them, I found the kitchen sink element to be distracting, annoying, and one series in particular, I did not finish the book. In fact, if it had been a physical book and not an audio, I would have thrown it out the window because I was so annoyed. So,
which was that?
I'm not saying over the air.
Oh, come on! You can't do that. You gotta.
You want? Okay, I'll man up. I can man up and I can say it. I cannot read the Monster Hunter series. By Larry Guerra. I'm sorry,
okay.
Larry.
I've heard of that, but I've actually heard of that.
You loved it all the way up till the last act.
Up until the last act, and I was on board. I bought the next 2 books. I had them lined up, ready to go. And then I got to the 3rd act. I'm like, this is too much. And the goofy meter just kept getting tipped for me. This is me personally. And I got so annoyed I couldn't finish it. So, I'm sorry that it broke some of my personal rules. So
no, I think the goofy meter is a great way to explain, is to touch on it, because because you start reading it, you're reading at to a point, and then you go, all right, this wouldn't get this crazy if this were a real situation. Because you focus on things. In other words, things happen, but you tune them out. You know what I'm saying? Like in a real issue, when you're dealing with, like, say, a killing or a death or some horrible thing, the news is still on. Your neighbors are still loud. The dog's still barking, but you tune all those things out and you focus. And that's a story is about focus. It is where you're bringing the reader's focus to something. And when you get into this stuff, this crazy ass stuff, it's just it becomes comic, and I do think I think you just said it all when you said it's about tone. It's back to that original that story I was telling. The first one is leading you to one horrible thing. The second one is intentionally saying I want the reader to be thinking, what the hell is happening to this guy? All this crazy stuff. And it is almost a parody, but it's a horrible parody. So I think it definitely is all about tone.
Well, I suppose an example of kitchen sink concept that worked extremely well was the old school original Doctor Who, insofar as it could span just about any genre and, hit anything. Everything in the kitchen sink could show up, but it was separated by episodes and time and place.
Right. The specific episode or series of episodes was about this.
So one day it's dealing with the Daleks on Skara, which is a post-nuclear wasteland, and then
is that the one with Davros?
Yeah.
Yes.
I
And
saw
then
that
there's,
like, in the early 80s, and I was like, oh, this is cheap but cool.
Yeah, was. Well, and then, a couple weeks later, he's on a planet full of vampires.
Right.
It's vastly different.
Well, you can do that in a series. I just finished watching The Prisoner
I love
again.
The Prisoner.
I haven't seen it in God, it must be like 10 years.
My dad used to have a Lotus with the car 120C license plate.
Oh, that's I never even paid attention to that until the episode where, remember, he goes back and the woman is in his apartment and he like quizzes her and she knows what the license plate is and she knows what's wrong with the transmission and all this other stuff. That's an example of a show that he wanted to just do 7 episodes, and then they made him do 17. And there's one that's a Western. The episode is a Western. In the last 2 minutes, they come back to, well, we're still in the village and this is going on. But that was a kitchen sink show too. But that got pretty damn kitchen sinky sometimes. And
actually, come to think of it, though, why did it work? It was the whole thing was kind of psychological warfare. They were constantly trying to fool him into like what was real and what wasn't.
Right.
So I guess the framework allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and that's why it makes it unique, because how often can you get away with that?
I was thinking of Fable. You guys remember those comics, Fable?
I never really got into them, but yeah, I'm familiar with them.
They just threw mythology and everything, fairy tales, whatever they could find. Just throw it, get it in there. It was like, I don't know, it was like the British in the end of World War II. We don't have any tanks. Send the ambulance. Get the ice cream truck out there. Throw it out there.
Or Howard the Duck.
Oh God, Howard the Duck.
I mean, you want to talk about a kitchen sink? I mean, it was anything that Steve Gerber wrote became a kind of this kitchen sink story. I mean, his Man Thing. And did you ever read his Defenders run? It was freaking. It's Steve Gerber and David Kraft, and they did some wacky crap in that. There would be episodes. There was the 50th anniversary issue, where they're all like these big battles, and some big event happens. They battle these beings, the Zodiac, who were clones, and 3 of them didn't make it out of their tubes that were being born. And the lead villain, his heart was broken because he made this beautiful clone who died. So in the 50th anniversary issue, everyone's running around zapping people, and the villain is sitting in a chair depressed because the girlfriend he built died. That's messed up stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, you should check some of those out. They're bizarre as hell.
Real quick, Wolf 10 says, and always repeat, and then this.
And it's interesting you brought that up, Wolf, because that is a variation of the kitchen sink plot. It's called the and then plot, in which you really don't have a story arc or even a coherent plot. You've just got an ongoing string of events that abut each other to make a story. And then, yeah, that is a variation of that plot.
You know what that sounds like? My first ever D&D game that I DM'd.
Oh, wow.
Well, let's go do that in that format.
It's like, okay, you guys are all right, so you've killed the kobolds. Well, and then a noise comes from the forest. There's a growl and a clawing of the trees. You hear the scratch. Oh yeah, what is it? It's a lizard man. Okay, and then
it's back to just shows you how incredibly sophisticated I am. I'm going to make another Simpsons reference. Ricky Joya. Remember, there was an episode. This was 30 years ago when The Simpsons was funny, and at the end of the episode, they were all sitting in the living room, and Marge says, "Well, I think we learned this," and Homer says, "I think we learned this," and so on. And he gets to Bart. He says, "There was nothing to learn. It was just a bunch of stuff that happened." And that's it. That's the difference between a story that won't light up, the engine won't turn over, and just putting, well, this didn't work, so I'm going to throw a Godzilla in there, and that didn't really do it. So now a talking air conditioner with feet is going to walk in. It's not a story. It's just a bunch of weird stuff that you managed to slap together. And
you know what? You know what sometimes causes that though is it's like when Ish was saying at the beginning, like a lot of this is like when an amateur writer, and I think one part when an amateur writer doesn't do that is they have a plot, they actually do have a design, and they don't give the story room to breathe. It's like a couple that thinks they always have to talk. They're uncomfortable with the silence, so they have to fill that awkward silence, right? But when you get to know each other, you don't have to do that anymore. And it's the same thing. Like when you've got that story, you don't have to force that moment
because you're confident. You're confident that this is compelling. The reader will want to wait.
Exactly.
Want to wait. It's the opposite of the Michael Bay plot formula, which is you have to have something happen every 10 minutes. And guess what? That's what most people want when they see they don't go to these movies for character development. They go for stuff to explode, and the character development that there has to be very brief and to the point. You show someone who watches certain movies today, you show them Chinatown, they're going to put a bullet through their skull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's I read or I was listening to a podcast, or I don't know. I drive a lot, so it may have just been a YouTube thing. But it was they were talking about comic books and storytelling and art and everything, and he said that the writer serves the artist, and I thought that is such a '90s mindset that it hurts. Because it's just what you're saying. It's like, I've got to fill this with boom, with bang, with something. I've got to draw this awesome, weird looking guy with 90,000 pockets jumping out of an airplane with 2 daggers in his hands and firing a gun from his teeth or something. I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, and everything's got to be that instead of like creating and investing into the character and the moment, getting the facial expression right, getting, like the tonal change, if that's what you're doing, building the scenes to make the peaks and valleys so that when you get to that moment, it makes people, just cry or shout or just, you have some sort of emotional synaptic bliss.
When Steven Spielberg showed the first cut of Jaws, the audience remember when the head comes out of the boat. Remember the head comes out of the hole in the boat.
Yeah.
The audience jumped and hit the ceiling. They did some more fine tuning to the editing, and I can't think of it offhand, but there is a scene that comes before that that they added that was a shock. And Spielberg noted, he said, when that head came out, the audience still jumped, but they didn't jump nearly as much as they did without that earlier jump there. There's a diminishment of returns for that stuff. So you have to keep punching and punching and punching. And it just seems that the audience, if you took out one action scene and filled it with character development, excuse me, I really think the audience, they might not be able to articulate it, but they're like, I liked that, because I don't think audiences are as stupid as people so casually say they are. I think they just can't articulate what they want about movies.
I would agree with that, because you look at all these comics readers who will not touch Marvel or DC with a 10-foot pole. What are they reading? My Hero Academia, which is nothing but that character. And it's deep.
I think another thing is I don't want to say the writer trying to be too clever, but feeling obligated to do so. And just hearing you guys talk, I was reminded of editing the Whispers from the Abyss anthology, which is Lovecraft, and just how many submissions I got where the author felt compelled to shove every Lovecraft reference they could possibly think of into a 1,000 word short story. And just
it's like eating a bowl full of caramel.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a little is great, but it goes a long way. And feeling the need to especially with the current trend of doing nostalgia fiction,
Right.
feeling the need to shove every 80s reference, every 90s reference, every movie, everything that's ever had the label of cyberpunk into your story, and to the point where and if you guys agree or disagree, please let me know. Is it a thing where you find that authors feel compelled to put this stuff in their stories because it's a trope or it's supposedly expected of their audience for a particular genre?
I would say that it's a symptom of primarily it started with the millennials and this idea of well, Joss Whedon does all those hip hop culture references.
Right.
I got to do that too. That's how you write a good story. You got to hip hop culture references. It'll be outdated next year.
It sounds like insecurity. It's I'm writing a Lovecraft story, so now I have to keep shoving what that reader out there thinks of as Lovecraft. Well, how do you know that that's what they think? Because everyone says it's this icky tentacle. No, it isn't. Not to me, it isn't. To me, it's a moment of awareness of the size of the cosmic, whatever beyond man. It's not about the ichthyous thing that engurgled out of my grandpa's library of festoon mushroom book. It's they're missing the point. And they're throwing all these special effects at the reader.
Yeah, they don't understand what they're doing. Basically, is what you're getting at. They really don't. They don't understand how to tell the point. So they're like, "Well, I'm gonna fake it." You know what I mean? Like, what do we do when we lie? When you lie, you over embellish the truth, right? You say, "Oh yeah, not only was it night, it was it was not night, it was dusk. The stars were kind of this way, and it was raining, and this and that. You throw more and more details at it until it's completely unbelievable. And I think it's go ahead.
And I think they're mistaking the purple prose and the stuff that people giggle about for the stuff that's really Lovecraftian, which is that cosmic sense of man's size compared to the rest of the universe. That's the scary stuff. That's the scary stuff.
Actually, for me, the scariest story Lovecraft wrote was the guy who was actually dead, and he had locked himself in his icebox of an apartment so that he wouldn't rot. I mean,
Cool
that's
Air.
terror.
Cool Air, yeah. Did you read The Rats in the Walls?
I have not read Rats in the Walls.
That was his first story that really did anything, and I read it again recently. I'm like, this story is still damn good. But in both of those, see, the Cool Air is a different type of story of his because it doesn't really touch on that cosmic stuff. Did you ever see the Night Gallery episode? That was a version of that.
No, I hadn't seen that one.
Yeah, it's in the second season.
Time ago.
It's pretty good for an American network in the 1970s. It's pretty damn good, actually. It's done with care. It has an interesting score that's not an orchestral score. It's done with a guitar, which is pretty non-Lovecraftian, and they really do focus on the characterization. So it means something when you get to the big scare.
Well, we are coming up to the end of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now is the time to remind the audience of who we are and why you should buy our books and where you can get them.
This is a segment we like to call "Who is Your Daddy and What Does He Do?"
Oh God, I
don't like this segment.
I'm not doing that, kid. No.
Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Buddy Lord. You can reach me at the Buddy Lord on Twitter. You can reach me at bladenight.com. I'm going to put that in the chat. You can go to bladenight.com and sign up for my mailing list for get any kind of the updates and exclusive merchandise for Sins of the Fae, including a free digital coupon for the light novel that is coming out in about a week.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah. good luck with that. John Stephen Walsh, Stephen with a PH. You can find me at johnstephenwalsh.com, where I talk about books, movies, and stuff that I like. See, I don't trash things there. It's only stuff I recommend you check out. And you can see me on Twitter. I don't know what the hell my name is on Twitter. I have 2 liters of caffeine in me. I don't know what the hell planet I'm on. Who are you people? And I have some stuff coming up soon that I can't really focus on right now. I have too much caffeine in me. So go to Buddy's site and look at his stuff and buy some of his stuff, because he puts up with me yammering on when he's trying to sell a book. So buy one of his damn books, will you? Come on.
You should find John too. He's a good guy. I'm sure.
Shut up! I hate you.
I'm sure he could write books. You know, I mean, this guy.
I have. So I have. You can find them on Amazon.com. But,
there you go.
See, you brought me into focus. God love you.
And I am J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit. And you can find my work on Amazon.com. And right now, if you want to read something that is Lovecraftian and not bad, not just a bunch of reference drops, it has hot ladies, scary monsters, and badass PIs, check out Case File Arkham 1 and 2. Or you can check out my cyberpunk epic, Utopiates, or the audio drama Titanium Rain, which is a futuristic fighter pilot story available on audio. And remember to join me on my great big alien show on Wednesday.
I have that thing. I have that thing waiting for me to. I listened to the first minute of it and went, okay, I have to sit down and listen to this whole thing through.
It starts off on track and then just goes off the rails after a while. And
so like every one of these things, I get it. It sounds good.
But it's a good kind of kitchen sink off the rails.
I think the first alien show I did was much better and far more focused, but we'll see where it goes. Oh, and finally, follow me on Twitter at J_Ishiro, where you can see every morning dating advice from Starscream.
Oh, that's the greatest thing. It's a wonderful little clip there.
Oh, I want to see that. I was giving some thought to that. I said I should do like a Dear John letters column type thing on YouTube. You know, it's like, I only read H.P. Lovecraft. Why don't the girls like me? Oh, and then, you know.
Have you seen was it Midnight Dreary with Poe that Magog puts out?
No.
Oh, you gotta check out Magog's show. He has this. Magog is a necromancer from another world who views our world and comments on it, and he has a little crow skeleton that he has possessed with the spirit of a thief that he caught breaking into his castle. And Poe does romance columns.
Oh wow!
Like romance advice columns.
So he stole my idea retroactively.
It's hilarious. And I am, as always, your host, Kat Rocha, the Night Editor. You can find me at nighteditor.com. And if you enjoy this show, definitely like and subscribe this channel. And think about supporting us on Subscribestar, or get yourself a t-shirt at tpublic.com. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Buddy. Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you. And definitely, if you folks haven't seen or heard of yet, check out Kat and Ish's comic book reviews, which I can't remember the name of. You know the one I'm talking about, the one with the
Adventures in Awful?
Adventures in Awful. You got to check that out if you haven't already. Go there and check it out. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you can find them on BitChute because they got kicked off of YouTube.
Of course they did.
They are too hot for YouTube, so check them out on BitChute.
You'll learn a lot about writing if you watch those. I'm being 100% serious. You should watch
now those. It's time to say goodbye.
Yeah, it is.
To all our writing family. FINNEY. See you real soon, guys. HOUSE.
Thank you, guys. You have a great evening.
Bye.